The federal riding of Desnethé, Missinippi, Churchill River essentially covers the northern half of our province. And it's a wild card. It's been known to swing between parties like the Conservatives, New Democrats, and the Liberals. In the last 25 years, 13 years went to the Conservatives, 7 to the Liberals, and 5 to the NDP. Today on Blue Sky, we have 2 of the 3 candidates running in the federal election in this riding, standing by to make their case for why they are the best person to represent Northern Saskatchewan's interests in Ottawa. Unfortunately, Conservative candidate Jim LeMaigre is sick and won't be taking part in the conversation today, but the conversation, it will continue. We already have questions from Northern residents that have been emailed in. If you live in the Desnethé, Missinippi, Churchill River riding and you have a question, send it to us by email. We'll keep this thing rolling. bluesky@cbc.ca. Okay. As I mentioned, the intention was to have all 3 candidates join our program today. We did have them all confirmed, but unfortunately last night we were notified that the Conservative candidate Jim LeMaigre is sick and can't participate, which is disappointing, but we do wish him a speedy recovery. And that does give our other 2 guests a little more time to talk to voters in Saskatchewan. And when we were planning the show, we thought about writing long intros to sum up your political experience, that great bio. But then we realized it is more interesting to let you introduce yourselves to our listeners, and we'll get to the politics a little later. So first, let's get to know you as people. Buckley Bellinger, you are running for the Liberals. What do you want listeners to know about you?
Well, first of all, I'm Buckley Bellinger, and I've been in politics for a long time in my throughout my life. I'm currently serving as the mayor of my hometown of Isla La Crosse. And in Cree, I'm just saying I'm here to share with you that my vision moving forward. And I also want to, I was taught a little bit of Dene along the way. So the Dene listeners out there, I'm just going to say, Kudiri, Buckley, Belanji, Ben Cheddar, Sabalhun, Gieth, Kutam, Nercicho. And basically, I just indicated to them that throughout my travels in the Dene community, that we've got a lot of family and friends that we've shared over the years. And Isla La Crosse in Northern Saskatchewan has always been my home and will always be my home. So I'm really proud to say that I speak Cree. I have a lot of political experience. I got a big family. That's what helps during the campaigns, of course. And again, I'm willing to travel and to meet with people all throughout this big riding, which covers 270,000 square kilometers.
Buckley, when you say you have a large family, who are you when you're not political, Buckley?
Well, I'm a grandparent to 6 beautiful children. My wife, Becky, and I had 3 girls. And when all 3 of my daughters were born, the whole community went to see our children because my wife also comes from a big family. Part of her family is from Buffalo Narrows, and they all come to see the girls to make sure they look like their mom. So that's something that even I celebrated. But over time, we had some very important families join our family. And I wouldn't mind taking a few moments to talk about, just mention the names of my grandkids. The first one is Mika, and the second one is Brody. And then there's Nixon, and then there's Cooper. Cooper is he's a good guy. And then there's the Mila, who's living in Saskatoon. And then, of course, we have our baby Leo, who's named after my father. So those are my grandkids, and God's good. He's given me a lot of good, healthy kids and grandkids. And he's also great by giving them their mother's looks. So we're walking here. Thank you.
I love that. Okay. Doug Racine, you are running for the NDP. You also ran for the provincial NDP, so you might be a familiar name in the last couple of months as we just went through that provincial election. What do you want people to know about you?
Yeah, well, I grew up in in and around a Métis community in southern Manitoba, and and spent some time with my dad on the trap line when I was a kid. I am not fluent as Buckley, and I certainly wouldn't want to attempt to say anything in Cree or Dene right now. But certainly that was part of our upbringing. But being surrounded by having an English school and not having, we didn't. A lot of us lost our language, but we're working hard to get it back. When I grew up there, in the Turtle Mountains, it was an experience that I won't forget, because I got to appreciate traditional knowledge and what my dad and my uncles knew of the bush. So I love the Northern Saskatchewan. And I love spending time in the bush, and I do spend a lot of time there when I'm not on the campaign trail. But after the trap line, my dad made me take I took a guiding course to guide American hunters. I did that for a year or two. At the age of 16, at the time, you could join the Army with your parents' consent. And I think they were only too happy maybe to get rid of me. But I went to the Army, and for 12 years, I served with the Special Service Force. I served overseas on a peacekeeping tour. And I managed to save enough money to put myself through law school. And I practiced law on the Muskeg Lake Urban Reserve for 25 years and now reside in beside Prince Albert National Park. But during that law career, I got to do a lot of federal law. I represented First Nations and Métis clients on the National Energy Board for the pipelines that were going through the province. I represented First Nations and Métis at the Nuclear Safety Commission, which as a lot of people in Saskatchewan may not understand, but every time the uranium mines want to change something, they have to apply for a license, and it goes to the Nuclear Safety Commission, and I represented First Nations and Métis on that. So over the course of my life, I've probably represented about 1,000 people from Northern Saskatchewan, and really become to love the people of Northern Saskatchewan, and I really want the opportunity to voice their concerns in Ottawa.
It's interesting to me, you both spoke so passionately and immediately about your First Nations and Métis backgrounds. Why is that important for people in the North to know and understand? You can go first, Buckley.
Well, I think it's really, really important, because I think something like 76% of the riding are people of Indigenous ancestry. And I think it's a great opportunity, because I live in Northern Saskatchewan. I've always lived here, and I've said it before, I'm going to continue living in Northern Saskatchewan. But the key thing, I think, is that as Indigenous people, it's important that we get to exercise our strength in terms of participating in the democracy called Canada. Too often we think that voting isn't important. So the one message I would say, yes, Indigenous candidates are coming forward. I always commend them for letting their name stand, because it takes a great amount of courage to do so. But the key thing is, as Indigenous people, we have to raise our hands, not only to run as candidates, but to get the vote out, so people in Canada know that the Indigenous community is very, very strong when it comes to voting. We're going to participate in this democracy as best and as much as we can. So it's important to get Indigenous candidates, but we need to get our vote out to show our strength in numbers. And this is an opportunity that I want to share with people while I have the podium, and to express to them that we just have to get our vote out. That's very important.
Doug, what about you?
Well, I think that understanding the people of the North, Indigenous people of the North, and really truly understanding where they're coming from, and the depth of say traditional knowledge, or the depth of their kinship knowledge, and how they bring families together. I use that as a motivator. I know that the responsibilities are extremely weigh heavily on my shoulders, if I become the member of parliament, that these are the people that you need to look after. So when I look into the eyes of the people of these small villages and towns that I'm visiting, I'm looking into the eyes of my own grandmother. And my grandmother's passed away, 35, 40 years ago. But I know she's still with me and watching me. And when I pass over to the other side, I know she's going to be the first there to greet me and pass judgment on how I treated each and every one of them. So I use it as a motivation to know how special those people are, and there is much of the amount of responsibility that I carry on my shoulders, and I will carry if I go to Ottawa.
I do wonder how differently some people would ask if they really thought of their grandparents meeting us first on the other side and passing that judgment, and if it would change their behavior at all. I want to talk to you about where you live. Buckley has mentioned he lives in the north. He's always lived in the north. Doug, you're just outside of the riding. Doug, is it a detriment to not actually be living in the riding?
Well, first of all, you have to remember, I was living in the riding until they changed the boundaries. Mm-hmm. So now I'm just a few kilometers out.
Can you tell people where you are, just so they know where you are?
Yeah, so it's at Anglin Lake, between Christopher Lake and Waskesiu.
So is it a detriment, though, now that you're not in the riding? Does that matter, do you think?
Well, it certainly doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to me. It might matter to some people, and it might matter to some people. But the thing is that it doesn't so much matter where you live as it does your commitment and love of the North and the Northerners and the elders and the people that are trying to scratch out an existence in the North. I think that probably overrules that you're a couple of kilometers outside the area. And of course, again, I was in the riding up until last June.
I'm not sure where Jim LeMaigre actually lives, so I can't speak to the Conservative candidate. And as we mentioned earlier in the show, he was invited and had confirmed, but unfortunately is sick today and wasn't able to make the conversation. But Buckley, you make a lot about you living in the North and being from the North. It's something you're really proud of. Is that a really key point of your campaign, is understanding where you're from and where you grew up?
Well, I would add this. At 28 years of age, the community of Isle Cross bestowed a great honor to me and elected me as their mayor. And at a young age of 28, don't forget when I mentioned I come from a very large family. So having all those brothers and sisters help campaign for you is really a blessing. And so it's nothing to do with intelligence or hard work. We have a big family, and that's always in politics very, very important. So at 28, becoming the mayor of Isle Cross, you learn so many things. And then we eventually evolved into, in 1995, I became an MLA. And then after 2 decades of representing our region called Athabasca, we then, of course, became cabinet minister for CERM, Environment and Resource Management. I was an associate minister for intergovernmental affairs and Aboriginal affairs, for housing for 8.5 years. I served something like 6 or 7 portfolios. There's no question that I've worked with a lot of mayors. I worked with a lot of First Nations and Métis during that path, and also with the federal government. So I think when I look at our experience in the North, living in the North, having that experience, and also seeing through my living room window some of the challenges around roads, some of the challenges around housing, and in particular the incredible challenge with illicit drug use. It's just ravaging our community. So we're not insulated. We're not protected from that reality. And every day we see it as leaders and we see it as Northern people. So from my perspective, when I look at the opportunity for the MPship, I want to go tell our stories, not just of the challenges, because we all know there are challenges, but the incredible opportunity attached to our lands. And every morning I get up in a Northern community, every morning I look out my window and I see some of the opportunity I see the water, I see the minerals, the trees, the forest, everything's just so beautiful in the north. And then you see the challenges. So I really think that from my perspective, the experience that we've enjoyed, the lessons we've learned, and the fact that you have to live it to appreciate it and to address it. So I'll finish off with the note that from my perspective, why I want to go to Ottawa, I want to tell our stories of opportunity, of challenge. I want to be the navigator and the advocate on behalf of the many issues that we face as Northern Saskatchewan. And we get along with so many people and learn from so many folks as well, that I think we can do an excellent job of being that advocator and that advocate directly in Ottawa.
Doug, why do you want to go to Ottawa? Why do you want the job?
I want the job because traveling through the north right now, there's a couple of really obvious problems. And one is housing, and housing either on reserve or in the small villages is either non-existent or well below or substandard, and it has become a crisis. Like the other day when I was standing in front of two houses, one beautiful bungalow and then another house right beside it. The one was one RCMP officer living in that beautiful bungalow, and the next house had 15 people living in it. I mean, the overcrowding is absolutely, and the poverty in some of these places is absolutely bone crushing. And then when you take a look at the fact that I was visiting with the fire department here in Larange the other day, and they said we picked thousands of needles up just right in that bush right there. And that speaks to homelessness. The homelessness right now in the north is out of control. And something has to be done. And I just want to give one more example. They have an 80-bed extended care unit in Larange here. 100 and some employees are going to be needed. There's no housing. There's no childcare spaces, and that's backed up 6 months to a year. So what we're seeing here in the north, with the roads, the lack of roads or good roads and infrastructure, what we're seeing here is that the north has been forgotten. All the tax dollars that is realized obviously goes south and doesn't make its way back, and that has to change. And the Liberals and the Conservatives have been in power in this province, in this country, for the last probably 20 years. And the North has been absolutely, categorically forgotten. There's not enough resources here. And I think that if a lot of people in the South understood what was going on in the North right now and the struggles of it, they would agree that something has to be done. I mean, it's a crisis right across the north. I'm hearing it in every community, and the Liberals have been in power for the last 9 or 10 years, and I think that they have to wear that.
I'm Sam McKeag. You're listening to Blue Sky. Today we are focused on the federal northern riding of Desnethé, Missinippi, Churchill River, as we are 11 days out from the federal election. Advance polls open tomorrow for the long weekend. You can go to Canada's elections website to find out where you can start voting as of tomorrow, Friday. But we have the candidates. We had all three candidates confirmed. Unfortunately, Conservative candidate Jim LeMaigre is ill and was not able to make the conversation. But we thought the conversation was important, so the conversation continues. Buckley Bellinger is our Liberal candidate, and Doug Racine is our NDP candidate in this northern riding that really does cover a really big part of Saskatchewan. And it is time to get into the issues. Buckley, Doug, you both raised really similar issues in the north that need to be addressed in Ottawa. Good roads, a need for housing, serious drug use issues. They're problems that exist right across the province. I mean, even when you talk about roads. What are each of your parties offering to help with solutions to these problems? Doug, I'll let you go first.
Well, in regards to the housing program, when I started looking at it, certainly there's a lot of federal housing programs, several, and maybe and I don't really want to focus on those too much, except to say this: it is blatantly obvious that they are not working for the North. There's a shortage of housing up here. There is overcrowding, which leads to things like tuberculosis, and probably it should be classified as a crisis and emergency funding coming to Northern Saskatchewan. So I think that what I would do if I go as a member of parliament, the first thing I'm going to do is take a look at why these programs are not working. I mean, one of the things that I was told talking to people is sometimes it costs 6 times as much to service a lot for a new house up north than it does down south. And so these federal programs just aren't working. The first thing I do when I go to Ottawa is elbows up and get things done and get houses built in Northern Saskatchewan, because over the last decade, this housing crisis just didn't happen. Mm-hmm. It's been happening for about 20 years and get progressively worse. And you don't have to ask me. You can just go to the streets of all the communities in the north and see that. In regards to addictions and addiction centers, and to help the people that are suffering from drug addiction, each community you go to, they all have ideas. They all have ideas about, different healing centers and stuff like that. And there's about maybe 4 or 5 different types. But what's so amazing is that these communities can do they want to do the heavy lifting. They want to get the work done. The problem is that there's no federal funding, or the federal funding that is being provided isn't enough. And we've now got ourselves into a crisis situation, much like some of the inner cities, but probably worse. For example, someone's been throwing out this statistics, and I have yet to check it, but L'Orange homelessness is 6 times more per capita than the cities in the south. So when when I get to Ottawa, in regards to that, it's going to be elbows up, and it's not, Buckley, you're renowned for your storytelling, without a doubt, and I hear it all over the north. My approach would be a little bit different. I can tell a good story too, but I'm going to be elbows up, and all those conservative and liberal ministers in Ottawa are going to know that Northern Saskatchewan is not going to stand for it anymore.
You sound like a defenseman in a hockey game. Buckley, what about you when it comes to those issues, housing, homelessness, roads? The Liberal Party has been in government for some time, but you're under a different leader now. Do you expect things to change? Do you expect there to be different solutions? What is your party's platform proposing as solutions to these problems?
The first thing I want to do is just correct Doug on one point, as I was corrected. When a First Nations leader within the Meadow Lake Tribal Council said to me, don't use the word houseless. Don't use the word homeless. We have a home. It's called Northern Saskatchewan. It's called our land. We are houseless in our lands. And I think that's really important to have that distinction. And the other thing, in my experience, I've heard a lot of eloquence over the years on the problems. Mm-hmm. Great speeches on the problems, Sam. Mm-hmm. What we need in Northern Saskatchewan is clarity on the solutions. So we got to shift gears here. I can make a speech on homelessness and tell stories of my childhood, but where's the solution in all of that? Mm-hmm. We recognize there's been hardship. We recognize there's been challenge. We recognize there's been all these issues that we have to deal with. And you look at the leadership in Northern Saskatchewan, 75% of their time is dealing with issues of poverty associated with all the challenges we see at the local level. And this is the reason I put my hand up. This is the reason why I want to become the MP. When we see our prime minister, who's a very capable prime minister, someone that I could follow, when he makes a commitment to build our own homes, and he makes a commitment to 500,000 new homes in Canada, well, guess what? I want to be at that table with that prime minister and saying Northern Saskatchewan wants a part of that, the commitment, so we can find solutions to our communities. So again, I tell people out there, there's great speeches on the problem. People in Northern Saskatchewan need eloquence on the solution. And that's really, really key to point out. And having somebody within government to advocate for a fair allocation of housing to our communities is a good first step.
We have an email from Debbie that kind of fits into this conversation that I'd like to go to. If you live in the riding and have a question for the candidates, you can send us an email, bluesky@cbc.ca. We also, if we don't get to them all, if you have a specific question, we can forward them to Doug and Buckley afterwards, and they can respond to you if we don't get to them in the show. So please do feel free to send them to us at bluesky@cbc.ca. Debbie works with White Lightning Consulting, and she emailed us a question for the two of you. It says, our Northwestern communities are in a mental health and addictions crisis. If elected as our representative, what will you do immediately to financially support our local, specialized professional team who have for over a decade delivered effective and efficient healing mental health intervention for our rural and remote Northwest communities? I don't want to single out a particular organization, but what is your party's promise when it comes to tackling mental illness and addictions? Who wants to? Go ahead.
I'll certainly go forward. I want to commend Debbie and the White Lightning Healing Project, because that's exactly what we need to start the turnaround. If I can explain to folks, being the mayor, you're totally familiar with the challenges that we all face. There is no community immune to some of the illicit drug use challenges that we face across the North. No community whatsoever. We are all impacted. So we have to be all in to provide those solutions. And I go back to Debbie's earlier point that all the communities and all the entities within that communities and within those communities have to be part of the solution. But where we are lacking is specific support for programs like Debbie. I know that because as a mayor of my home community of Ottawa La Crosse, people go into detox. Some people are really genuinely trying to recover. But when they come out of detox, they have no place to live. They have no place to go. Sometimes even the families don't want them because of their drug addiction. They have no jobs. They have no training. So what happens is the opportunity for relapse is probably the only opportunity. So the road to recovery for many of these addiction people caught up in the addiction is full of potholes. It is a difficult road to recover. And when you have organizations like White Lightning trying to make a difference at the local level, we have to understand that their challenge is great, but nobody is going to provide a solution except organizations like that. I know. So we got to figure out the crisis around housing. We got to get some mental health supports. We got to get job supports. So these people are worth the effort. Some folks said, oh, it's too late. It's too bad. And I tell them, folks, this is someone's child. This is someone's grandchild. So let us create the avenues for them, the off-ramps for them to exit. And some of the challenges they face as they come out of the crisis that they're in, and if it's a detox center they walk out of, where are the services in the North? Too often we got to ship people 6-7 hours away. Why hasn't the province stepped up and also done their part? Because from the national perspective, as a hopeful member of parliament for Desnethé, Missinippi, Churchill, I want to go forward and say, here's our some of the solutions that are in place. We must create the other avenues of support so our people back home have the opportunity to recover.
Doug, what would you say in terms of immediate support for mental health and addictions from the NDP and from you specifically?
Right. So the horses got out of the barn and the Liberals let it out. They've been in power again for the last 10 years. And before that, Conservatives, we've had Conservatives and Liberals back and forth. And this drug crisis that we have, this addiction crisis that we have, that you can see anytime you walk any of these streets up north, didn't happen overnight. It happened under the Liberal watch. And what the fear is from many of the people I talk to is that we're going to see the same old. There'll be a few trickle of dollars here and a few trickle of dollars there. One of the things that really hits me in the heart is when I go talk to these addiction workers and how hard they're working, how exhausted they are. And there just haven't been provided the resources to get to save lives. And I'm getting that in each of the communities that I go to. I think that if you get me to Parliament, the first thing I'm going to do is, again, tell stories, explain the situation, but also, you know what I mean, use my 25 years of legal experience to knock some of those doors down and get Canadians on side that a healthy North is a healthy Canada. And if you can convince them of that, then I think that we can really make headway in places like Northern Saskatchewan.
I want to talk to you too about the price of food in Northern Saskatchewan. Back in November, our national reporter Alexander Silberman went up to La Ronge. It was part of a story he was working on about scurvy coming back to the north. Scurvy, of course, develops when a person is deficient in nutrients that come from food. Specifically, it's a prolonged lack of vitamin C. Alexander set up outside a grocery store in La Ronge, and he chatted with residents about what they are paying for their groceries. Here's how that went.
Sir, any chance I could ask you how you're feeling about grocery prices these days with food being a bit more expensive?
Well, they are more pricier anyway. But they're saying it's supposed to go down, or what? Or is that just talk?
I don't know. How are you feeling about the cost of food in the north these days?
It's a little harder to go by, Like you go further north, that's where it's really pricey. Yeah, by Wollaston Lake and stuff like that.
And does the cost of food kind of decide what you're buying when you go to the grocery store?
You do decide, because there's a few options. Other stores will be a little cheaper there, and you got to go there. Well, of course, a little more gas.
It's noticeably gone up. A lot of times in the past, it didn't matter if things were on sale or not. You could get them anyways. And I've noticed for myself personally, now it's like, I'm not buying stuff, because I want to. It's like, okay, let's see how much prices are. Fresh stuff, it's got to be on sale. Buying full price for stuff is just ridiculous with what they are right now. It's like $8 for a thing of strawberries. That's insane. I feel like one of those old people who's like, I remember when gas was 80 cents. It's I can say the same thing about strawberries, and it's really sad.
It's more expensive, yes.
What do you find some of the most expensive things at the store?
Oh, meat is ridiculous. Yeah, the meat is, in the north, meat is a staple for every meal, right? And especially in the winter time. And it's just skyrocketed. I mean, I'm making cabbage roast, and the expense of the vegetable and the meat is ridiculous. I should be charging my family for eating. No, I'm just kidding.
And what about? Just kidding.
That was Alexander Silberman chatting with residents outside a La Ronge grocery store in November. We know prices in La Ronge are much lower than in other places in the far north. At a northern store, the local one in Stony Rapids, a 10-kilogram bag of flour is more than $40. A 3-liter bottle of olive oil would run for more than $70. A container of green grapes, $20. I'm wondering what you two think is the federal government's role when it comes to make sure that residents of northern communities have access not only to nutritious food, but affordable food. Buckley, I'll start with you.
Well, the amazing thing, from my perspective, there's two answers to that. Developing a really good transportation system, decent roads. Once you have access to especially in the far north communities where the transport of food is incredibly high, I think over time that you have to invest in the highway so people are able to travel, and then all of a sudden the competitive and market conditions exist where many of these stores have to start matching the prices of places like La Ronge as an example, even though La Ronge is high. So investing into a good highway system is key, because then families can travel to shop and realize services as they're able to do so. Right now, and many times some of those communities they're isolated, and this is where the whole transportation of food gets transferred to them. Now, the other part is what Cumberland House and La Loche and some of the other communities are doing. And when I met and visited the chief of Cumberland House, he spoke about food sovereignty and food security. The Delta around Cumberland House, which is always being threatened, by the way, they have some of the richest soil in Canada. And the chief has always maintained in Cumberland House and in the village as well, that we can learn from our elders and start growing our own food, becoming an independent Cumberland House Cree Nation. So not only do you supply yourself with your fruits, but also with your potatoes. And then they also looked at the issue around agriculture. So I think a lot of people in the North, absolutely, food sovereignty and food security is a key thing, and there's some really solid leaders. I remember in La Loche, they're actually growing a lot of vegetables right at the school there, at the high school, and they're teaching the kids how to do this. So as we look at the cost of food, yes, they are high, but the solutions from my perspective as UMP is that we have to sit amongst each other and just have a series of discussions around food security and food sovereignty, where we can take the lessons of the era passed us by, and we can start growing our own crop, growing our own vegetables.
Do you mean that as like hydroponics and greenhouses? Because, I mean, it's hard enough to grow vegetables in the south in Saskatchewan on a good year, and the climate and the land is so different in the north. So how would, I mean, those setups can be expensive too.
Well, I know some of the schools are doing this already, and I look at some of the leadership of the First Nations and the mayors. A lot of them know that the opportunity to grow their own food is something that is paramount to the survival of their community. When I go to the store and I see that some of these berries are imported from California, I'm saying, well, we can grow this stuff here. So some of the leaders are really saying that it's time for us to look at fresh produce, good fruit at a reasonable price, and let's look at the food security and supply of food. We start developing our own solution to that crisis.
We did talk to the school in Isle of Cross that's doing this, but it is pretty small scale and it does rely very heavily on one involved volunteer. Are you talking about like creating a committee of citizens who would make this their priority?
Well, absolutely, because the lessons learned from the experiences, whether it's in Cumberland House, La Loche, or Isle of Cross, you learn how to do certain things well. Well, those lessons should not be forgotten. So my point being is that if we have strong leaders in the North advocating for food security and food sovereignty, where we supply our own community with fresh produce and fresh vegetable, fresh fruit, then guess what? It's a solution. So as we embark on this journey, my point being is that we're getting the ideas from key leaders. It's time for us to get active and see what the solutions could be and support them in this initiative.
Doug, what's your solution or what's your proposal for food security in terms of fresh, nutritious, and affordable food for Northerners?
Well, let me tell you a story. I was canvassing and I went to a First Nations community. And there I'm friends with one of the elders there. And she pulled me aside and she said to me, do you know what she says? Everybody on this reserve is hungry. And I said, well, I couldn't get my head around. What do you mean? She said, what happens is that the people that are on, a subsidy from the band or from Government Canada, to get their $200 or $300, they don't have a vehicle. So then they got to pay somebody $50 or $100 for gas to get to the nearest town to buy the cheap, nutritious groceries. And by the time they pay for the gas, they've got next to nothing left. So after they do that a couple times, they just give up and go to the convenience store and purchase their food. So it's really nice to talk about programs, and some of these programs that Buckley is talking about, they're wonderful, they're great. I think it's a great idea. In some cases, it might take years to set up. They have a federal program called, I think, the Northern Food Program. And that is supposed to make groceries cheaper for, if we give subsidies, and it's supposed to make cheaper in the north. Okay, it's obvious from your comments about what happens in Stony Rapids that this national food program for the north is not working, and it's causing serious medical conditions. And it's not simply just to start one little program here and one little program there. It has to happen. That has to happen. But that whole national food program that's supposed to be for Northerners has got to be revamped, or another. We have to take another look at it. And again, the only way you're going to do that is get somebody to Ottawa that has the advocacy skills to make that happen. So this food security has a lot to do with the. I was talking to people in Sandy Bay. I think they go grocery shopping in Creighton, so it's 2.5 hours there and 2.5 hours back, and they spend half their money on gas. So it's also about accessibility and making sure that each of these communities have access to the food that they need for their children and their elders and everything else. So it's not just an issue about. It is about how much the groceries cost, but there's other aspects, and so you've got to look at the transportation aspect and how that influences the decisions. And so, that national food program for the North, that's got to have another look at it. We've got to try and turn that around so that it's effective in providing food at reasonable prices for people living in the North. And I just want to make one more comment. If you can solve that, healthy communities mean a healthy province, and they mean a healthy Canada. They also mean a healthy workforce. And we need a healthy workforce. We need to get control of the drug addictions. We need to get control of the food security. And we need to improve housing. And if that happens, the North thrives.
I have 2 more questions I want to get in for sure that came from listeners. So I'm going to ask you to keep your answers to these ones brief so that we can get to both of you on both questions before we run out of time. This is not a chance for you to outdo each other here either. First question. Regan in Pinehouse says, there are concerns about the land, water, and air in Northern Saskatchewan, many not being able to access their homelands, fur blocks, trap lines, as much as they once could due to companies targeting natural resources. What will you do to advocate for the people losing access to their traditional land, and how will you stand up for the environment in the North? Let's try to keep these ones to a minute each. And Doug, you can go first.
Okay. As a lawyer for 25 years, I did the duty to consult, where the government has to consult with First Nations or Métis Indigenous communities in regards to mining projects and such. I can tell you right now that the duty to consult does not work in the North, that the duty to consult should be scrapped. It needs to be replaced by something else. And there needs to be teeth in that so that the Indigenous communities can have more control over their lands and resources. So first thing I would do is try and get that duty to consult revamped, changed, or whatever, because it's doing the First Nations and the Métis and the Indigenous people of the North a huge disservice.
Okay, Buckley.
Well, I would say the one guy bringing us all together on the protection of lands and resources is Donald Trump. He has indicated time and time again that he wants to make Canada the 51st state. And a lot of people may look at it as a simple statement, but we have to be very, very, very aware of what his plans are. And from my perspective, one of the reasons I go back to our national leader with Carney. Carney has been a phenomenal global experienced person, where he's gone and talked about a lot of resources and opportunities in different parts of the world. He's got a lot of experience on how to negotiate. And when Trump comes along and says, hey, I like your water, I'd like to have some of your resources, people are going to say to him, and this is the answer to Reagan's point, is this is our land. This is our water. This is our country. And so Trump, in some silly way, is going to spark a unified Northern Saskatchewan. Because as an MP, I want to say the land will unify the people, the Métis, the First Nations, the non-Indigenous community that make Northern Saskatchewan their home. We are one powerful force if we join together. There was a dream one time by a man named Jerry Hammersmith. Mm-hmm. He said many, many years ago that if the North unifies and they create a power sharing arrangement between the Métis, the First Nations, and the municipal structure, they will become a powerful force. So I'd say to people that knew Jerry Hammersmith, his dream can be realized. It's not going to be denied. It's just simply delayed. So we need to get together, protect our land, because threats, even from the president of the U.S., are very real. And if some people want to join the U.S., as we hear in the news a lot, well, move there. We got a country here we want to build, and the First Nations and the Métis people and the non-Indigenous people of Northern Saskatchewan are saying, let's get on with building and defending Canada. And this is a really, really important point that Reagan raised, protecting our lands and resources.
Okay, I'm not going to get to the last question, unfortunately. But there are many questions, and they can inform future programming. So we could end up dedicating a whole other show to some of these questions. So thank you to everyone from Northern communities who submitted questions for today. I want to end with voter turnout. In the North, in the last election, it was not good. It was just over 30%. How are you two going to make sure that even if people aren't voting for you, that the voice of the North is heard and that people go cast their ballots? Buckley, you're first, and try to keep this to 30 seconds, please.
All right, quickly, last time we ran, the voter turnout was dismal. But don't forget, we had 10 of the biggest reserves shut down for COVID. We don't have that problem this time. So we're just encouraging people, come out and vote. Show your strength. Show you that the North is serious, and come out and vote in big numbers. Then we can take on the world, and we can also go to Ottawa and say, our people have spoken.
Okay, and Doug, what about you?
Well, I've been door knocking in these villages and small communities and in La Ronge, and every time I knock on a door, if there's somebody that's not an NDP person, I still tell them to get out and vote, because it is so important that the North has a voice. These people that live up here in the North are very, very special. Every vote counts, and it's going to make the world of difference come April 28th.
Well, in the final days of the campaign, the big push, good luck to each of you, and we'll see what happens on April 28th. Thanks for making time for us today, and we wish a speedy recovery to Jim LeMaigre, who was unfortunately not able to make the conversation today. Buckley, Doug, thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, that's it for us this week. We are back on Tuesday. It's been a wonderful week of conversations. Thank you to our producer, Nicole Huck, our technician, Chris Haynes, and to Jenna Leith for all the wonderful video she has put together this week. You can watch this program on our CBC Saskatchewan YouTube channel this weekend.